with General Welfare presents, and this is an audio tape on the 31st of March, 2020. It's an audio tape because, we are sequestered, and I don't have a video. I don't have an adequate video system, and my friend who does, we're not seeing each other. We're staying as far away from each other as we possibly can. I'm staying as far away from everyone that I possibly can, except the person I'm living with. And, we're both in it together, If I get it, she gets it. If she gets it, I get it. But that's it. I don't want anyone else to get it, and I don't want anyone else to get it from me. So I'm living under these circumstances that many of you are living under, and that's the situation. So now the most effective model for how to deal with this disease occurred in Wuhan. They shut everything down. People stayed where they were. All transportation was shut down. Everything was shut down, and they tested. They treated. It was a massive operation, and they dealt with it. But the rest of the world is not able to do that. South Korea and Japan. Well, Japan was able to do it, to do something like that because they have 10 beds per 1,000 population. So that's a lot. That's like 4 times the average of the U.S. and over 5 times what we have here in the King County area, in the Seattle area. So that is the difference. The difference is what we have available. And the ability to ramp up the production of what is needed would be obviously a lot easier in Japan and South Korea and in China than it is in our consumer society, our pleasure-oriented, post-industrial consumer society, where we are able to get all these things from all over the world, but we don't have to create them ourselves. And now we are in scrambling as a nation to restore the capability to get to our hospitals, the ventilators, to get to all of the equipment that's needed in this situation. Now, all of you have probably heard all about this, but the problem is that this virus triggers in, I think, 20% of the population an immune response that overwhelms the lungs and creates pneumonia. And if you cannot get through that, you cannot get through that without assistance, either respirators, ventilators, or whatever. So that's the situation. And right now, the United States does not have the equipment to handle all of it. And that equipment has to be created as fast as possible. So that's what you're looking at. And that's where the deaths occur. The rate of mortality will go down dramatically depending upon the equipment that you have and the ability to deal with these situations where people have to be hospitalized. Where 3% of the people that are hospitalized are going to need ventilators. And those 3% are going to die if they're not treated. So that's a situation, a very serious situation. Now, one of the collateral effects politically on this is that this brings into relief the fact that our society, that is the United States and Western Europe, especially in Europe, do not have the means to deal with this. It's because we're the post-industrial society. It means that we essentially don't have the capability to unleash the productive power that we should have had, we would have had in the past. So this calls into question the whole issue of the way we have lived in the last 50 years, especially since the 70s, the last 40 years or so. And now we're in a situation where we have to change our orientation. So that's one collateral aspect of it. Another collateral aspect of this is that the having to shut down the economy, which is mostly shutting down the service economy, nonetheless creates a very stressful situation for the financial situation, because you have all these service industries that are not going to be able to pay their mortgages or pay their rent or pay their loans and so forth and so on. And you're not going to have all these people working who can pay rents on all the rents. So you're going to have a cascading effect that is detonating the already overripe, indebted financial structure, which is already on central bank life support and has been since 2008. And that situation is being massively exacerbated all over the world by the response to the coronavirus. Now, cavalier, or shall we say, okay, so on top of that, we have a third situation, which is there's massive disinformation going on the internet about the virus. There's a massive disinformation saying that the virus is really not that bad. It's just like the worst case of the flu. Not that many people are dying. Why are we shutting everything down to do this? This is all being done to create a police state, or all being done to create a financial dictatorship run by BlackRock and Trump and the Federal Reserve and so on and so forth, and that this is the end of our freedoms, and you have this whole line of thought, right? So that's one version of it. Another version of it is from another disinformation operation, something like QAnon, which is saying, this is the beginning of the end of the international financial crowd, and Trump is now going to be in control, is going to take over and run things, and we're going to have development, and we're going to throw all the bankers in jail and all this stuff. That's another form of disinformation. You have all kinds of disinformation out there. And that disinformation is causing people to have a lot of anxiety. Okay, anxiety about the financial collapse, which is very possible, which is very likely here. Anxiety about the virus, and uncertainty, and it's also undermining the willingness to have faith in the authority. So the authorities who are responsible for mobilizing the population on this crisis are not trusted. Okay, which is understandable, but that's further. But there is a massive disinformation operation on the internet being done by the British. The British are very nuanced disinformation operation because it is very likely or possible that the ultimate effects of the response to the virus and the financial collapse will lead potentially to what Lyndon LaRouche has been proposing, to a new financial architecture, to a new system. Because the system that we're in now is exhausting itself and is in the process of exhausting itself. It's in the process of dying. And from the British standpoint, the new architecture, the new paradigm of economic development between nations, the new paradigm of restoring an industrial orientation away from the post-industrial service economy based on cheap labor and a just-in-time world globalized chain. That is to the power that runs this international empire, to the British. That is unacceptable. And it would be better to have chaos. And it would be better to have collapse of nations, destruction of nations, chaos, riots, all those kinds of things occur and so forth, that then have a new paradigm emerge. And that's why you're getting this massive disinformation. A lot of my friends are getting on it, because they see a conspiracy. The virus is being used as a conspiracy. A lot of my friends are getting really sucked into this. And they're not looking at it from the standpoint of the consequences of this. And then there's a whole bunch of other people in this context who are saying it's bioengineered, and that takes on a whole nother dimension of not trusting authorities, not knowing what's right, what's wrong. Was this bioengineered? Is this the way they wanted to eliminate the Belt and Road? Did American servicemen involved in the games in Wuhan, the armed services athletic games in Wuhan, introduce it? And you got all this stuff going on, and that further undermines the effort that has to be made by nations to, one, reduce the morbidity rate of this epidemic, and two, to begin to restructure their economies and their and ultimately the financial relationships that will be necessary for each nation, or nations in general. So we're entering that kind of situation. So in this context, you have the president just signed a $2 trillion package to deal with the loss of wages, the loss of business, and so forth and so on. And they're now scrambling to figure out how to get the money to people, how to get the money to the businesses, and all kinds of vehicles are being set up to do this. And but then on top of that, there is now a leverage $4 trillion bailout of the financial system. And one of the interesting aspects of this is the bringing into the administrative process a money management firm by the name of BlackRock. And BlackRock has approximately $7 trillion under management. Vanguard is another one with $5 trillion. State Street has close to $3 trillion. Now, these are allegedly the total industry is about $74 trillion. So these are not banks and like lending people money. These are the people necessarily. These are the people. These are the entities that manage everybody's money. All the pensions, all the savings, and everything else like that. So now they can then, as an organization, they can then buy stocks and bonds and everything and hold them. And also, they can be buying and selling other things as well. And they have essentially thousands of people working to find the best deal for the so-called investors. And they have these huge supercomputers that give them an incredible edge on what's going on in the markets and everything. And on top of that, they own, for instance, like BlackRock owns 22% of Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs is the premier bank, investment bank, which is at the center of all the central banks in the world, because most people that end up in position of central bank did their stint at Goldman Sachs. I like to call it Goldman Sachs, but that's probably too obvious. Anyhow, so and this goes on to corporations and everything, and so you have essentially a significant chunk of the stock and the bonds and all of the banks and all of the multinationals and everything is owned. It's not owned. It's owned by people, but rich people, the wealthiest people, and even people with their 401ks and all of that, it's managed by these managers, investment management firms. There's a whole bunch of these management firms, but they can then exert influence on these companies. So what's happening is BlackRock, which is the largest, is being brought in to administer a lot of the vehicles that are going to be used to purchase all of this garbage that has to be purchased from the financial system in order to keep the whole thing afloat. So now you're getting a merger of the largest private money management firm, BlackRock. What you're getting now is all of these. You're getting BlackRock being merged with the Treasury, being merged with the Fed, and so essentially, what you're ending up with is a private-public partnership, three-way private-public partnership, all to keep the system going, all to keep the financial system from collapsing, all to keep the funds coming in, all to buy up all these things. So the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, is now piling up with all of that debt. So the Treasury is going to be issuing bonds to buy this stuff, and all of this, a large part of this, is going to be administered by money management investment fund, which has all the computing power and everything else. So this is sort of like an expansion of liquidity to keep the financial system from blowing out. At the same time that you're having to shore up and keep people alive and keep the society alive during this period of the coronavirus, which also requires a tremendous amount of government expenditure and having to go into massive debt to do this. So this process is going to exhaust the system. And at what point, then, does the system go under? At what point does the money managers, essentially their whole entire system of stocks and bonds, essentially can't be sustained, and the values can't be sustained, and then the values of all these stocks and bonds and everything goes down. And then the question becomes, what within that entire system of investment, what investments actually have a physical value in the real economy and what investments don't? And that's where you come into the question of having to separate out those which are have real economic relationship and those that don't. That's the peculiar place we're going to be in. Now, in that situation, and many people will have different views of this, and they might be right, I might be wrong. The president is the one that can intervene under an emergency of that type and say, okay, we need to have these agencies decide which of these investments are real, which of those stocks are real, which companies are viable, which companies are not. And then you have an entire process of shutting down this entire, wiping out all this worthless debt. And this is not just something that has to be done on a local basis, on a national basis, but on an international basis, because these money management firms are international on a global scale. They're international. And So this is going to require, at some point, a meeting of the major nations to figure this out. That is where we're headed. The power of the neo-Malthusian British crowd is going to be crushed by this. The Green movement is going to be crushed by this. All of these, the whole idea of a post-industrial Hollywood entertainment society is going to be crushed by this. All of this is in the balance. So that means a new orientation for humanity. So that's pretty much where we are. So that is why you're getting this massive disinformation operation in different forms. One is that everything's going to be okay, Trump's in control, he's taking over the Fed and the Treasury and blah, 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 blah. Or you have this massive disinformation that the virus is not that serious. They're just using it as an excuse to impose police state measures. And, and they're playing upon the rugged individual mentality of the population, which is, to some degree, has a paranoia about the government, which to a large degree might be justified, but your government is what you have. You don't have anything else. You're not going to make it on your own. So that all of these things are being triggered to try to get this to prevent this change, to prevent the shift towards a new paradigm that is definitely will have to be adopted, because that's the only way to go. And now, in that context, the LaRouche movement is planning a internet video conference on the 25th of April. This can be a very big conference. Can involve thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. And this could be the forum for laying out what the new direction is going to be. And so those of you who are watching it should go to the LaRouche Political Action website and see if you can find a way to register for that conference within the next few weeks. Okay, so this is where we are. This is the situation that we're in. And this virus is very serious, and it's very real. It's going to be a lot of people that are going to die. The amount of people that are going to die or not die is going to be dependent on two fundamental things. To what degree the supply of ventilators and respirators and other equipment is available to treat those who are having the pneumonia, and the filling up of their lungs with fluid, and to what degree the population is willing to follow the guidelines. The problem in the U.S. is that we cannot completely enforce the guidelines that are required, because that's not the nature of the culture and the society that we're in. In China, that's not the problem. People don't have a problem with having a total equivalent police state apparatus, forcing the population to submit to the guidelines. There's a much greater sense of a community, of one's individual identity being connected to the community, than there is in our culture here in the U.S., where we're not committed to the community. We have somewhat of an opposition identity we have this kind of opposition to the community mentality. An individual, who can get ahead first, who's number one, who's number two, that kind of thing. We have that kind of culture. So it's not the kind of culture that promotes this, in and of itself, the solidarity, but the solidarity is now coming into play. There is a dramatic growth of solidarity in the population during this crisis, as there has in World War II and as there had in other situations. It's that quality of solidarity that opens the door for the necessary changes which are going to have to be made. So Now, Trump has reversed himself on the April Easter, letting up Easter, and now he's gone for 30 days, and I suspect there'll be another 30 days. So it'll probably, everything that we're in right now will probably hold, in my view, not just till April the 30th, but will hold all the way into June 1st. So this is going to be a rough time for people, and it's very important that people not allow the massive disinformation that's out there to affect them. This is a turning point in world history. This is a turning point in the fate of the human race. This is a turning point in our lives, in our personal lives as well.